Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it, but thank you. Thank you. Thanks very much, but I want to get started. I didn't want to make an honest man out of Chuck. Some of you may have heard him say this evening, and I think a number of people thought that was going to be literally true. So I didn't want to move on. But I am very moved to be here and to be able to talk with you. And Jim Colby has been extremely courageous, and it means a great deal to me that Jim took the platform to introduce me as he did. I was thinking about that congeniality thing. You know, you try to learn from other people, and I heard Sue Lovell say that in the South they know how to disagree with people and make them like it, and I thought for a minute about trying that, but it doesn't sound like a lot of fun, Sue. So I'll probably pass on that. I have been an admirer of the Victory Fund for its entire life. I've occasionally been the beneficiary. I am very proud to be a participant with them. We are winning this fight. We started out, few political movements in America have as clear-cut a beginning. Obviously, they were very courageous gay and lesbian people before Stonewall. But Stonewall really was an igniting factor, and you can date things in our movement from Stonewall in terms of people beginning to find each other and get organized. And the progress we've made in those 40 years has been enormous. Now, I always want to acknowledge to younger people in particular, when we talk about the progress, we're not suggesting that anyone ought to be grateful for the fact that there is less of a debilitating, vicious prejudice than there used to be. It sort of reminds me of a particular mystifying form of religion Jim and I talk about, where there was an enormous disaster and great devastation is wreaked, and people then thank God for the handful that avoided the devastation. The notion that God was off on the day when the devastation happened in the first place never quite fit for me theologically. But George Orwell said it best when he was shot in the neck during the Spanish Civil War, and someone said, well, you're very lucky you were shot in the neck and survived. And he said, well, I think all the people who were never shot in the neck in the first place were even luckier. So had there not been a bigotry that has had such a negative effect on so many, we would have been better off. The fact that we're making progress is important for two reasons. First of all, some in movements make a mistake to think that you should always tell people things are terrible. Never acknowledge that things have gotten better, because somehow your allies may slack off. In fact, the opposite is the case. If you tell people who have worked hard for something that once it's achieved it wasn't worth anything, you can discourage them from going forward. So let's remember, for many years, getting a hate crimes bill that was inclusive of LGBT people was on our agenda. It was signed into law last year. Not everything is happening as quickly as I would like. And it wasn't something to be taken for granted. Chuck mentioned the importance of being there in caucus. I will tell you, we had a caucus about this the first time the House passed it. Didn't get it through the Senate. We didn't have enough senators. We did this year. And some of my colleagues were being besieged by ministers who were erroneously telling them that if they voted for a hate crimes bill, those ministers would lose their ability to preach bad things about us from the pulpit, which was, of course, not true. And it was in a closed caucus that I was able to get up and say to my colleagues that I wanted to reassure them that that was absolutely false, that if the hate crimes bill became law instantly, it would still be legal to call me a fag. I added that I wouldn't recommend it to people who are in the banking business, but it would still be legal to call me a fag. And that's part of what we do. It's part of what Anise does. And David, I was very pleased to hear Councilman Gray talk about David's role in health care. And Anise came to this as the controller, the green eye shade kind of part of the work. Not the most dramatic, but the most important, as we have seen, when that's not done adequately. Those of us who've been lucky enough to win office and have a chance to serve, we serve in two capacities. We serve in our advocacy for LGBT rights, but we also serve to help diminish the stereotype because we are good or bad at other things. And so I do think my role as chairman of the Financial Services Committee, which you should understand I earned by dint of my charm and wit and diligence and the fact that I outlived everybody else on the committee in reverse order of importance. But it is important, but it's important that we be there as LGBT people. We are going to be moving on. I hope we will be seeing within a few weeks the passage in the House of the Employment Non-Discrimination Act, which is so very important. We will get there. We will get it done if we do old-fashioned, boring lobbying. There is nothing dramatic connected with getting bills passed. That's one of the reasons I am so enamored of the Victory Fund, because it pays attention to basic politics. It is not fun to give out literature. It is not fun to go door to door. It is not fun to try to raise money. I will give you a rule that I am convinced of. If you are engaged in a political cause dear to your heart, in which you believe very deeply, the more fun you get from a particular activity in the short term, the less it is likely to be contributing to the cause. There's an inverse relationship between the importance of what you do and how much giggles you get from it. Being with each other, cheering, demonstrating, etc., may make you feel good. It doesn't do much. And unfortunately for some, it's a diversion from what is done. So the kind of nuts and bolts work that the Victory Fund does is especially important. So I am very grateful. And it's what we have to do if we're going to lobby to get the legislation through. Now, this is going to be a particularly tough year for friends of the LGBT agenda. And let me say that there's an agenda. There's a Republican congressman, former Republican congressman, John Hostetler, who in 2006 said that people should not run for his opponent, who later won, Brad Ellsworth, because if Ellsworth won, the Democrat, he would become Speaker and he would become a member of Congress. He'd vote for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker, and she would allow me to enact the radical homosexual agenda. And I told a group in Boston the next day, the Chamber of Commerce, that I really felt somewhat inadequate because there was apparently at least one district, because the guy won big. The guy who made the charge was the biggest loser that year for an incumbent. And I said, I feel a problem because there's clearly a district in Indiana that's awaiting my radical homosexual agenda. And here's my radical homosexual agenda. Let us get married, join the military, and hold down a job. Now, no radical, no, I'll be honest with you, very few radicals in history would have thought much of that as the list of things to do. But we are working our way through it. But here's the problem. We're going to have a tough November, not because of our issues, and that's very important to note. We had votes in 2006 on an Employment Non-Discrimination Act and on hate crimes in the House. We had votes because the Republicans forced them on the constitutional amendment that would have canceled the marriages that are now allowed in states. I do know this, in 2006, no one who voted against the amendment to ban same-sex marriage was defeated by someone who was for that amendment. Now, some people prudently didn't vote for it, but the point is that thanks in part to the work that's done, not just in the campaigns, but in the culture, we're not losing on those issues. But this is not going to be a great year for the Democrats. We're somewhat overextended in the seats we've won. We also have this problem that we've been responsible for a series of actions that I believe have been very helpful in containing the economic problems we inherited from the Bush administration, but these things never happened quick enough, and there are things we have done that have kept things from getting a lot worse. But in the history of politics, no one has ever won with the slogan, "Things would have sucked worse without me." That's That's the problem.